this episode of the show, we speak to Ryan Barnard, the founder of the ARC Drug Rehab Center in South Africa, and also the founder of the Dual Diagnosis podcast. Ryan Barnard, welcome to the show. We're really, really glad to have you on board.
Cool. Hi, Oliver. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Cool.
No, I mean, the pleasure is all ours. This one is a slightly different one because, normally we speak to healthcare practitioners, and on the Moulding Live show, I try to get some inspirational people that I find, inspirational, and just someone with a slightly different story and definitely making a difference. And from the first time I met you, you were definitely one of those people. And I still remember the moment because I came in with, a new salesperson and Chris, and that was his first meeting, and we came to your, to ARC Drug Rehab Center on the East Rand. But can you remember that time?
I do. I remember that. Yeah, we did a presentation. You did a presentation, and I remember that. Yeah.
And I remember, Ryan, the first time I met you, I was just thinking, wow, I don't know how Ryan got in, how did he get into the whole drug rehab center? So I thought that was a story. I don't think I ever asked you, in too many words, sure. But can you take us through that? Because that's not something that, you just kind of stumble on and I'm an entrepreneur, let me just start up a drug rehab center. How did that story actually evolve?
So that's, I'm an addict myself. I'm an alcoholic, and I went to treatment when I was quite young. I was about 23 when I went to treatment the last time. I'd been to, my parents sent me off to these crazy militant sort of style places before when I was an adolescent, but when I got to about 23, I was working, and my parents didn't really have too much to say about my life, and I'd sort of dug a deep hole for myself in that I couldn't stop drinking. It was just like I was drinking every day, like a bottle of brandy or whatever it was every day, and I used drugs every time I drank, and I drank every day. So it turned into quite a scary sort of situation for me because, I'd make the commitment to stop, and I'd make that commitment based on very hectic consequences. Like I ended up in hospital with a brain injury and my brain had moved, and I'd swear blind, I'm not going to do this again. And then on the Monday I'd get out, and then 12 o'clock that day I'd be drinking again. And this went on for like months and months, and I'd put things in place to kind of like, stop myself. Like I'd make sure I had a cheap phone, because if I had an expensive phone, I could, swap it for more drugs and things like that. It was just hectic. So there was just like total loss of control and all these consequences. Went to treatment and got involved in AA fellowships and Narcotics Anonymous fellowships, and sort of started I met a couple of people that were also passionate about their recovery, right? There was one guy in particular that I met, Brian, who I'd met him once before 5 years prior, and he was quite a scary drug addict. He was using drugs that I had no concept of. Like he was using crack and heroin, and I was like 17 when I met him for the first time. Wow. And he introduced me to this stuff on one occasion. 5 years later, when I met him at an NA meeting, he told me the story that night the plan was to get me as wasted as possible so they could rob me. Anyway, so I met him at this NA meeting, and I was like, geez, this guy should really be dead. And he looked well. He was like, and he's working his recovery, he's doing all the right things and going to gym and study. He never got his matric. He was doing his matric, and I was so impressed. And him and I became very, very good friends. And what ended up happening was, so I've always been entrepreneurial. So my dad put me out the door when I was like 19, and he was like, off you go. He kicked me out, gave me my mattress and said, like, you don't come back. I was a hooligan, and I've always been entrepreneurial, it's something that I've just never been able to I'm very independent, right? And anyway, so cut a long story short, so I'd gone through the process of building up my business, and I was in the construction game. And I started investing in properties, and this guy approached me. He was like 80 years old, and he said, listen, I need to rent a flat from you. They've just repossessed my property. You know, and I've got all this furniture that I want to sell. Can you come and take a look at it? So I went and took a look at it, and I asked him about the property, and he said, no, the bank took it back. And I phoned the bank, and I managed to get the property for half of what he had owed them, which was a good deal, and it was ideally located. And I didn't exactly know what I was going to do with it, but I know that, but it sort of evolved into the idea of like, okay, cool. Well, what can I do with this place? And I was like, okay, well, you know, can do a drug rehab because I'm sort of in recovery. And Brian came along, and we founded this rehab, and it was very much based on like 12-step sort of stuff. So there weren't very many healthcare professionals involved. On a, you know, it was kind of like some, you know, in a lot of ways I was doing some of the counseling and Brian was doing some of the counseling. So we had no idea what the hell we were doing in like in the very, very early days. We did have some healthcare professionals, you know, who were guiding us and helping us and seeing patients and that, but yeah. And then what happened was a couple of years later, Brian passed away. He was 11 years clean, and he died. You know, they found him in his bathroom with a needle in his arm. He'd relapsed after 11 years, and no one knew that he relapsed. It was just sort of out of the blue. The guy just, you know, passed away. So that was quite hectic. But it was also sort of in a lot of ways freeing for me, because Brian had this very fundamentalist idea of what rehab should be, and you know, it came from this AA doctrine. And I was always, you know, of the opinion that we needed to get more healthcare professionals involved and kind of like do a dual diagnosis kind of thing, because that's my history. I've got a dual diagnosis, right? So I was diagnosed with ADHD and as an adult, and I mean, you know, my history at school and just throughout my entire life, it made perfect sense that ADHD was like the correct diagnosis. And anyway, so that's the story of how I sort of started moving into the direction of dual diagnosis, and getting a lot more healthcare professionals directly involved, and running the place sort of like purely from that perspective.
So, I mean, like, I think the first thing I do want to say is, I mean, thanks for sharing that. I mean, like, I think that's an incredible story, in terms of, you know, how you got started and kind of the history around it. And I can't help but sense, I mean, like, you know, that's pretty powerful. I mean, you know, people always say, like, what is your, you know, the stimulus for change, or the stimuli for change? And it's like, you know, stories like that, you know, you have to make a difference. So I really love that. And yeah, sorry to hear about Brian as well. I mean, I think that's always the difficult part that, you know, people don't speak about, you know, especially with people struggling with alcohol and, you know, drug abuse, is that there's always that relapse part. And that's why you have to be so careful and, you know, to make sure that you're always strong, you know, most of the time, and you have a cool, you know, support structure around you that almost can pick up these things.
The thing is, on that, sorry,
go first.
On that note, like, and I don't want to go into discussing the whole COVID thing, like, just, you know, when you're ready with that one, but circumstances come up, you know what I mean? Like, getting married and having children, okay, it's a hardcore thing. And if you're trying to build, you know, like for me, you know, I've got married, had kids, trying to build two businesses at the same time, you know, it's things can get overwhelming. And I think that's also what happened with Brian as well. Like, there were circumstances, there was circumstantial stuff that really sort of, you know, the guy was solid. He was always solid. He was always like, he knew the program and all that kind of thing. But relapse doesn't necessarily mean that you're letting go of your support or anything like that. You know, it can just be that things are just so incredibly overwhelming that it's just, you know, I've always thought of suicide before I thought of picking up drugs and alcohol, right? And that says a lot about how much I want to avoid picking up drugs and alcohol. Do you know what I mean? You know, so yeah.
And it's such a huge, I mean, again, I mean, we had someone on and we were speaking about the same thing, you know, like suicide and how hectic the last 2 years. I mean, I would love to go into those stories, and in terms of your own experience of COVID. And I know you said that now, but I was going to go into like, the business effect that it had on you, like because we spoke like a few times, over the years, and and I remember in some of those conversations you said, actually I have to let my restaurant go at the moment. I have to let my construction company go at the moment. And those are real things. And I think what you're saying is so profound because, my brother got married recently, actually last month. And I've
Yeah.
been, he got married quite late in life. But I was trying to give him, because he would always ask me, like, so, what's your thoughts on this? Or, how would this? And I was trying to distill some of that stuff, and make it kind of profound and, like all of this wisdom. But as you said now, I mean, life kind of happens, eh? I mean, what I told him as well, nothing could have prepared us for when we had children. It was like the most
Yeah. Oh,
life-altering moment. Even now, every morning I wake up at 5:15, and 20 years ago you wouldn't have never caught me alive, waking
yeah.
up at 5:15. Maybe working till 5:15, but definitely not waking up. And now it's like one of those things, because if you don't, then you don't get the kids ready for school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you here.
Mm. Look, yeah, life is intrinsically. I mean, I suppose we don't have to tell anyone this. It's intrinsically tragic at the best of times, right?
Mm.
So yeah, and like a lot of people are like, oh well, it's what you, it's what you do to transcend that. And I'm like, yeah, that's easier said than done. Hey, like sometimes it's like just overwhelming. Hey, yeah.
Mm. You know what? And I think we probably struggle with this, in some way. I'm saying the two of us because in many ways, I'm not happy with the status quo. So you're always pushing, like, how can we be better? And I think that's where the business angle kind of comes in. Is like, yes, I know sometimes I wish I could just be this person that's happy in a job and happy with the
Yeah.
paycheck and happy, like, just doing my 8 to 5, come home, have the weekends free. But
Yeah.
like, I'm just not wired that way, and it's always like
Well,
pushing to be better.
that's, I mean, listen, I 100% agree with that. And I think people like you and me, like entrepreneurial people, like that's where we find our meaning,
Mm,
and it's what gives us meaning is pursuing these objectives or whatever. I met somebody who said that I've got shiny penny syndrome, so I run around sort of like spotting opportunities, and then I'll take those opportunities on and run with them. And um, you know, it was a good point because I do that 100%. I mean, like you mentioned, I started that restaurant 5 months before COVID came along, and it was a raging success. I mean, I nailed it. I really nailed it.
mhm,
Um, and it was actually the first time in my life where I actually felt like, cool, I can actually call myself an entrepreneur because I've done it. I've combined resources to create, this uh, uh, the service and these products that I can bring to the market for a profit, and I nailed it. Like they were queuing out the door, and
mm,
COVID came along and sort of just wiped that all out in an instant, in a flash, and I lost so much over that. But yeah, there are people that sort of run businesses, okay, and I wouldn't call them like I don't want to sound like a fundamentalist or whatever, but I wouldn't
mhm,
call them like real entrepreneurs because
mm,
they said they'll settle into this business and they'll just run it, like work in their business like an employee, do you know what I mean, and run it
mm,
until the day they retire, sell it, and sort of like bugger off to the coast or whatever. But I think entrepreneurs sort of are constantly on the lookout for new opportunities and new ideas and new things of bringing stuff to the market. And it's a creative pursuit, Oliver, and I think in a lot of ways that's why you and I are also doing this podcast thing, is because like it's a creative pursuit as well.
mhm. Yeah.
How we wired, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, it's actually so scary. I mean, it gives me goosebumps again because I was trying to explain to my daughter because, she's in grade 8. So, she's like, and we were talking about like, what do you want to do when you grow up? Because when she was like 4, she would say, I want to be a rock star and a dentist and a professional swimmer. And we
Yeah.
would say, no, but you can't be all three. And she would say, no, but I can. And now, obviously, teenager, she's changed her mind. But she was talking about, like, what are you? And I'm like, I'm more an entrepreneur. I've got
Yeah,
businesses. And she was
that's
like,
it.
is that like a business owner? And I was trying to, exactly what you just said now, that's what I said. It was like, I think anyone can buy a business and then a
Yeah,
business owner. But to be an entrepreneur, I think you have to create something out of nothing, like
yeah,
this. And you say, okay, cool. Is that like, would I pay for it? And then
yeah.
do something like that. And for
It's like
me,
seeing,
that's, yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing.
It's the way we perceive risk. It's like it's not the same as the way other people perceive it. It's just
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I love what you said about shiny penny syndrome, because that's
yeah,
actually what my wife used to tell me, and she was completely right, because that was
sure,
exactly what it was. It was like, I would get so excited about the idea, and then I would do this thing, nonstop for like 2 or 3 weeks, or like even maybe
yeah,
months. Go get the domain and do all of that nonsense, and then nothing happens. There's no revenue
yeah,
from it. It's just like, and then I would move to the next one.
yeah,
And until I could figure out that it's actually not about the idea, and this is, I mean, in so many business books, they tell you the same thing now, but it's not about the
yeah,
idea. Anyone can come up with an idea, but it's about the
yeah,
implementation. It's about the tenacity of sticking with it until you got it actually honed down, and then moving on to something else. You're almost
yeah,
like not allowed to leave it until it's either failed or succeeded,
yeah.
and then that changed it for me.
So I want to come back to that, but I think on that note, if finding the idea and sticking to it, no matter what, it's like it's not in me to abandon something that I've. It's like, because it's starting a business is like having a child for me. I mean, the scale of the responsibility is especially when you've got employees and you've got suppliers relying on you to pay them and things like that. It's do or die, and that's the way I've always seen any business that I've started. Is like I literally see it as though, like, I'll die if I don't succeed, So it's like, no matter what. But yeah, so I met this guy, and he's a really an excellent, an amazing businessman, a really intelligent guy. And he was sort of mentoring me for a bit, and you mentioned the shiny penny syndrome thing, and the the most important lesson that I took from what he told me and from what happened with the loss of these other businesses was that I've got to be very, I've got I've got to be more careful about the opportunities that I pursue, because I'm getting older. Okay, time's like the clock's ticking, right? I'm just about 40 now, right? And I know, like, if, I want to. The next 10 years are important. Like whatever I do in those next 10 years, like that's going to be important, right? And so I don't feel as though I'm as fit and healthy as I used to be. So yeah, I've got to be careful, right? But what happened was these other business, I had to walk away from the restaurant because there was just no coming back from what happened. I managed to like Magava, a lease with another restaurant chain that took over the place, and I managed to sort of do all of that and look after it in that way. But I went and I diversified on this construction business so wildly that I deviated from the original business objective, and I screwed it up. I screwed it up. Like,
Mm.
I focused so much on operations and inventing a new way to manufacture this product
Mm.
that I didn't pay too much attention to sales.
Mm.
And sales is the lifeblood of any business. And eventually it just, turned into this situation where it was like, okay, cool. Am I going to continue pursuing this, or do I just end it and sort of, consolidate my attentions and focus on something, because again, like I said, I've got 10 years that I want to do something important. So I decided to do that. And it was devastating. It was devastating to let go of that business. It was like, I ended up on my bed. I'd wake up, come down for breakfast, go back upstairs, park in the bed for the rest of the day. And like, it was like I'd lost a part of myself, and like, as though I'd like died.
Yeah.
Um, and I became so incredibly depressed, and it got really bad, like nihilistic, and geez, like I really, and that's why I started this whole podcast thing, Oliver, is because I
Mm.
wanted to. again, wanted to pursue something that was going to give me a bit of meaning and all that. And it's so cool because I'm having conversations like this, and I would never ever have put myself on a video in a million years. Like there's no ways.
Yeah.
But I thought, cool. Well, let me do it. Let me just do it. And if anyone has anything to say about it, they can say it. And I'm trying. So
Yeah.
it's been fun.
I love that. And I mean, I think what you just said, the last one is I'm trying. I mean, I think for me, that was the thing as well. And there's something sometimes about the thing with that as well, Ryan, is like we're trying, but you're trying in isolation almost. And the one that changed it for me with podcast was Pat Flynn. I mean, like from the Smart Passive Income, like he absolutely, like even now, I haven't listened to an episode for a while, but normal guy, he just took it and he just started talking about his story, and it was like very, very successful. And I just thought, okay, cool, yeah, sure, let's drop everything and let's see, this would be the, as you would meet me and as I would meet you, like at ARC. And we talk about it, like I say, this is what we did. And yes, maybe it's not the best one, and you get to choose, like maybe someone else's story is better. That's cool. Maybe you don't resonate with us because not everyone is going to like, like and trust you. And that's the reality. But you just need a few people that actually resonate with the story. And as long as, you believe that you're doing something good, which I definitely think, I mean, like, we can come back to ARC. I love your story. I love the fact that, I mean, you provide employment for healthcare practitioners. That's a completely different spin to how we normally work with healthcare practitioners. And I remember, when it changed, when I was sitting in your boardroom, and the first thing I was thinking, because it was, normally when someone...
On a note, it's not employment, hey?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry. It's healthcare practitioners work at your center. Sorry. I mean, in terms of like a space for healthcare practitioners, to work from. Yeah, definitely. That's the ARC model. But yeah, so when I was in your boardroom in in that December, I think it was, and it was the fanciest boardroom that because normally when we go to meet practitioners, it's normally like their therapy room, which is like that's it. But there was like a fancy boardroom with a projector, and I remember sitting there and we're doing a demo of the software, and we were busy telling you about like we can do the website design, and you were telling us then, or you were telling me about the website that you designed, and it was the first time I thought, wow, okay, cool. We're not obviously dealing with someone that just kind of stumble onto these things, and I think that's the way you approach things. Is that right? Even with the podcast, I mean, if you look at, I want to go into what it is now and how, where you see yourself in the market. But I think the way you got the equipment, like your setup, it looks pretty snazzy.
Thanks. Cool. So thanks. But yeah, so I think, again, as entrepreneurs, it's our job to combine resources to, provide a service to bring to the market for a profit, right? And that's always just it sort of comes, I mean, once you've been doing something for 20 years, you know what I mean? It like comes sort of intuitively, I think, and creating an opportunity and spotting opportunities and seeing them. It doesn't come naturally to everybody. And I'm not, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn type of thing here, but like, I think I have my place in the world, like as an entrepreneur, do you know what I mean? And it's taken me a very long time to actually say those words and be like, okay, cool. Well, this is what I am, and I kind of like do an okay job at it. Do you know what I mean? It's cool. So yeah, creating those opportunities. Not everyone could do them, and I can't do what a psychologist does. Hey, I mean, like I'd make a terrible nurse, like 100%. I'm the least compassionate person. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but being an entrepreneur, again, we need to know more about their industry or their scope or whatever you want to call it than they know about ours, right? That's always important. Like, the HPCSA ethical guidelines, like I can recite a lot of the stuff in my sleep. Do you know what I mean? And I'll sort of correct psychologists on certain things and all the rest of it. It's because I've had to go and investigate all of those things. Psychologists, and that's the thing with mental health care professionals in general. I mean, you can go and do the psychology, get your masters and all the rest of it and get registered, but they don't really take you through an entrepreneurship process or a process of how to start your private practice. You know what I mean? I don't think it's too in depth, if at all, right? And that's one of the things that I've just really noticed about a lot of healthcare professionals is they're very vulnerable when it comes to things like knowing how to start a practice and get it going, and audits from the medical aid for an example as well. They aren't they're analytical, but they aren't sort of like, they don't have that really like that very skeptical sort of like thing that I have, which comes from being an entrepreneur. You got to sort of eyeball everything. So yeah.
I can definitely agree to that too. I mean, to everything, because and two things I wanted to say is, I mean, again, I mean, like my wife say, clin psych, and she works, like quite a few sessions every single day, and I always tell her I could never do that. I mean, almost like you're completely plugged into the session. You have to be in that moment, for 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day, and it's actually, I mean, this is not like reality TV. This is like, like live, you completely plugged into someone's, like stories, and that's difficult to do. The other thing I wanted to say about the entrepreneurship stuff and healthcare practitioners, I almost like would say, and again, because we're talking in the Moulding Lives show now, is to say it's almost like they don't really want to play, as a complete entrepreneur. I mean, they do want to have their own practice, and they do want to make that successful, and there's a little bit of business skills. But to be at a level of ARC, there's very few healthcare practitioners actually that transcend to that level, where they actually want to make, like passive income, and they want to do this. And so it's almost like they're wired differently, to how you would almost think, an entrepreneur is. So there's some type of like almost middle ground between, like salaried employee and entrepreneur, and, somewhere there is where I see most of them.
I see my job as sort of making it as easy as possible for them to do exactly what they're good at. Okay. And the rest of the stuff I'll take care of in the background for them. You know what I mean? So they get to do what they do best, right? And do you watch a lot of Jordan Peterson stuff at all?
No, not really.
Okay, cool. So I just if I can tell you quickly this. So he talks about the big five personality model or whatever, right? So as an entrepreneur, obviously, you'll need to be somewhat disagreeable, right? Which means that you're gonna rather negotiate on your behalf than on a supplier's behalf or on somebody else's behalf, right?
Okay.
And if you think about the personality trait that you need to be a good psychologist, you need to be compassionate in a lot of ways, right? And if you're going to be, you can't be disagreeable and compassionate. Okay. So you can't negotiate on your, so it's difficult for them to be in business necessarily and be compassionate. You know what I mean? So that's, I think it's a cool meeting of the minds in a lot of ways. It's like, take care of the business stuff. You guys do what you need to do.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's where it's kind of worked, is like when, healthcare practitioners in private practice decide actually, we do want someone else to work, do this for us, even if it's software, like even if they, like do have the software in the background, and, the software does lots of things for them. That is that, that almost like common ground or middle ground, where they actually very cool with that. And then the other one is where you outsource it completely and someone else completely handles that. I just worry about, doing my sessions. And I think those, those seem to be the two models we've kind of come across. And in the last 2 years, I mean, with COVID, I see a lot more practitioners, coming up with courses and stuff like that, which is our next level, which, we've been almost talking about for a while, but I think, now it's becoming a reality. It's funny how that, that world kind of works, that world that you kind of thought about in your head, now seems to be that reality part. Coming back to the podcast, I mean, dual diagnosis, firstly, like a really cool name. I like that. But do you have plans? What are your plans for it at the moment? I mean, how often are you planning to come out with content and stuff like that?
So the rehab industry has always been sort of looked at as the sort of stepchild of the mental health care industry, right? It's like very almost frowned upon, right, by healthcare professionals, and you know, ARC. I've always tried to differentiate ARC and sort of have it, positioned as the authority, and sort of trying to push the envelope and do a better and better job, right? And uh, uh, you know, again, there's just hundreds and hundreds of rehabs that are like, it's like rubbish, like they have all these weird ideologies, and there's no sort of continuity, and it's not sort of, it's not good. So the whole idea of the podcast was to start showing people that there are legitimate places that do a proper job from a medical point of view, when it comes to drug and alcohol rehab. You don't have to just send somebody to the Karoo and where they will pray and dig holes all day, or whatever it is that so that's the idea behind it, is just to sort of get it out there that there are legitimate places. And the podcast, so I also got sort of like a couple of angles, but it's very new, Oliver. It's like a month old. So there's a couple of, so the one aspect is like, talking to the healthcare professionals and getting their views on things, and getting that information out there about sort of like what they do and how they do it, and how it sort of ties in with dual diagnosis and rehab. And then the other aspect is kind of like me being a talking head, kind of like giving my opinion on stuff, and being creative, which is really fun. I get so excited about that. My wife, it irritates her to death, because I just like, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and she's like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Funny.
But it's like, it's giving me purpose, man. It's really, again, I was in such a dark place because of what happened with COVID, and this has helped me so much, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, that's really the two angles that I'm coming from with regards to the podcast.
I mean, I actually posted a comment about it, but like, I watched the one last week, and it was amazing. And I was telling you, I mean, like, for us, we don't do too much of edits, because I know how much of work it is. And when I asked you, just before we started, and because when I saw the video, I can see the edits, and do you enjoy that process?
Yeah, I love it. I love finding the music, to like create the mood around sort of the stuff, and finding clips, and then timing the clips with the music, and
Okay.
I've always been creative. I've played guitar since I was like 10, and always been very, very creative. So well, not too creative. I actually wanted to study journalism. So yeah, I wanted to do journalism, and my old man, I was sitting at the dinner table. My old man was like, "You will not do journalism. There's no future in anything like that for you. You will go study IT engineering." And I was like, "No." And he chased me around the table with a plate. It was funny, but but yeah, journalism, or being creative, yeah, you get into the working world, and kind of like that takes over, and you kind of like lose all of those dreams of, like you mentioned, your daughter wanted to be a rock star, like she had all these ideas. I wanted to be a rock star, and if I think about it from a business point of view, I could have made it work. I mean, I've put the time in, do it properly, and I could have made it work, but you lose touch with your dreams and that kind of thing when you get sucked into this, this, like having to pay the bond and having to do this and do that, right? So I'm very fortunate in that I'm in a position where I can do this, and I think that's cool. I'm very lucky, and I need to keep recognizing that too.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, like, and it's interesting, just hearing that story, how those things are kind of coming into it, because what we're talking about is, in terms of the podcast, I mean, it's just creating content. It's creating content, and there's a journalism aspect to it. There's a creative aspect to it. There's the just creating something. And what I've found, like listening to podcasts for years now. I mean, I've been listening probably since 2010. Since Apple Podcasts came out with like podcasts. Like it was one of the things I did. And I learned so much from a business point of view, from people like Pat Flynn, Jamie Masters, Mike Dillard. And I found each one of them had their own style. Like Jamie Masters, I think it was the Eventual Millionaire podcast, and she would always be very giggly, as an example, and people in the comments would say, like, I can't stand this, but every week, I mean, she was like very
Yes.
successful, and
Yeah.
Pat Flynn had a completely different style. He was like more that average guy. He's just kind of like seeing how this thing works. Um, and I think
Oliver,
with you as
eh,
well, it's the same
yeah,
thing.
starting a restaurant, I was like horrified. I was horrified because I'd started this restaurant and then I was failing. I had no idea how to run a restaurant. I had no idea what the hell it took, or it was horrifying. And these reviews started coming in, like, what a horrible experience, and that was the worst experience of my life. And I'm like, geez, this is a 50-year-old woman saying that, like, so I started getting these horrible reviews in, and what I started to do, I thought, well, cool, I'm going to embrace this. I'm going to put signs up and say, review us, like review us more. I want to know what I need to change, and the the more the more I got bad reviews, the more people came. It was like it was a weird conundrum thing that was going on, but yeah, I think there's something for everybody here. Like you say, you hit the nail on the head. It's not like everybody's gonna like me and what
Hmm.
I have to say. And the problem with that is I do take things personally, and I'm concerned because, like, this. So I'm not wearing a tie. I normally wear a tie. Uh,
Okay. I don't wear one.
I started doing that because this guy, he commented on one of my videos. I was sort of like slouching in one of the videos, and he said you're slouching. It doesn't look professional. Like,
Mm.
basically told me to grow up, and I was like, oh shit, okay, I'm gonna do better. And I started wearing a tie, and I was like,
Okay.
so yeah.
Uh, yeah, but I mean, you can't please everyone, eh? And I
Uh,
mean, like, that comes. I mean, when I think of, I mean, even when I worked in corporate, I mean, there was only one job I had ever where they told us we had to wear a tie, and that only lasted like 6 months. I think the MD had some crazy idea that probably wearing a tie was, you know, and I think we would if it was, if the meeting merited it. I mean, like if you're meeting
yeah,
a high-profile client, when you pitch up there with a suit. I mean, that's just the way
mm,
it is. But like in your
yeah,
normal management meetings, and if you're meeting your normal clients, I mean, I think it's a very, I mean, there's definitely a sense to you have to dress up for the occasion. I get it, but I think just doing it for the sake of doing it, I think is a completely different take on it. And I find on that aspect, I find there's that level of almost freedom to get to choose whether you want to or not. And I think
mm,
that's what we earn. We earn, like, we don't really have to if we don't want to.
yeah, yeah,
It's my take on the dressing up kind of aspect.
yeah.
Um,
Corporate
I,
corporate must have been a nightmare for you though. Hey, if you're entrepreneurial minded, it must have been like being in hell. Hey,
yeah, no, but I also learned a lot. Like that
okay,
consistency part. And actually, one of
cool.
my first, oh, my second one, I had a bursary with Anglo, so
Oh yeah,
I was quite fortunate from that perspective. And they kind of taught you how corporate works. Like you start from the bottom of the ladder and you kind of climb up. And it lasted until I, got my degree, and then then I worked for this startup company where I learned tons. And in the
okay,
typical startup company, that's where I went to the US for 2 years. And I learned how you don't do it. How do you blow 30 million
yeah,
US dollars in 1 year? Like, how do you do that? Like, and I learned a lot from that, as in, don't do that. And even now, I mean, we've had so many, people saying, don't you want investment funding? Don't you want to do this? And I refuse, because
okay,
I refuse to be almost like you held responsible, from someone
yeah,
else. And I would rather, make, grow it slowly rather than, being held responsible around it. Because I think
yeah,
that stunts the creativity part. But yeah, coming back to the corporate, and then yeah, so when I learned with that stuff, actually my manager at that time, he was a CTO, and he actually went into drug rehab as well. I didn't realize it until many years later, but many of the things kind of make sense. He was always erratic.
mm,
He was always like bouncing over, balancing up and down all the time. And sometimes the decisions also wasn't the most best decisions, but we just, at the bottom of the rung. So we basically just listen to it. We pull the all-nighters and we do stupid things. But
yeah,
yeah, lots of those things kind of made sense. But when I
mm,
went into consulting, I realized for the first time that actually, yeah, I don't really want to do a full-time job. I mean, I think that's,
Yeah.
and once I made up my mind on that, and it was, what we were speaking about, I think just before the show as well, it's that consistency of even this, like the podcast.
Mm,
How do you get that
mm.
consistency? And if you can
Yeah.
get that, then that's amazing. And I struggled with that for a long time. And I
Yeah.
had like crazy ideas. I don't think I've ever told you, but it's in one of the shows I said I'm in.
Yeah.
I actually started a nightclub as well. So like, and
Really?
for me, yeah,
What?
for me, I mean, like that's completely off kilter, right? That's not. But I just looked at it and it kind of came up, and I thought, like that's a cool opportunity. It wasn't too much money as well. Um, but I remember one of the promoters, he told us, you talk about ugly reviews. And one of the
Yeah.
promoters, he told me, I don't know what you corporate boys, like, or guys maybe, because it was myself and my cousin started this thing up, what you guys are doing in this type of industry. And he was completely right. I mean, we shouldn't have been in that type of industry because it was such a difficult and
Mild
different
deviation.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we just looked at a spreadsheet and we said, 200 people come in per night, 300 people, and they spend $500 because we were thinking, how much do we spend when we go out drinking? And,
Yeah.
we should make like tons of money. And
Sure.
obviously, the reality doesn't quite work out that way.
Yeah. No, it never does, I suppose.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But that was my
Yeah.
first and the last time I said I would touch the service type industry.
Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because someone else told me, and I think this might be my wife as well, told me I should keep to my strengths. So I was like, okay, what am I good at? I'm good at
Yeah.
creating software. I'm good at creating things. Like let me just keep to that.
Yeah.
And that was good.
I mean, that's, like I noticed with my wife as well. I'm very disorderly, right? So I really struggle with order. Like you said something earlier, you were like, well, every Monday at 6 or whatever the video goes out. And I was like, geez, I'm just making videos and putting them out as they, you know what I mean? So I've actually just hired somebody that's going to come on and sort of help me with the consistency stuff. I think that is so incredibly important. And you mentioned being, working in a startup, and I always feel like I'm in startup mode, which is not cool. I mean, like a business needs to reach a point where it's populated with your all your administrative folk, and they run it and it gets on with it, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not obviously I read an article. Okay, so I read an article with about on LinkedIn earlier, Adrian Gore, right? And this guy, like he looks I mean, like a raging CEO type of dude, right? And
Which
I don't
is
know, I'm a Bob the Builder kind of like dude. So, but he seemed to have got the Bob the Builder and the raging CEO in two in one. Sorry, I just got the one half of that. So at some point I'm gonna have to find a CEO to take care of things.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I did a lot of research on this as well. And actually over the last few years, I changed my mindset around it because that was my mindset. Was like, I just kind of build it because I'm that type of person, comes in, fi- fixes something or gets it to work. And in consulting, that was my niche as well. Like if something is broken, I would be the person that comes in and, I can get it stable again. And then
Mm,
I'm kind of bored, so I want to leave. But
mm,
I realize in our own business, you always have to be that person though, because no one
yeah,
else sees it the same way that we do. So
no,
you can't. I mean, I tried it a few times, and every single time it failed. As in, I thought I'll just get it to work a certain bit, and then I'll give it to someone that can manage this thing. The problem is
yeah,
they don't have the skills. They don't have the
yeah,
thinking. So you almost like do have to try to be a little bit like Adrian Gore. Like
yeah,
even if it's like one day a week,
yeah,
and figure
yeah,
out how you do that because
yeah,
it's important. Or you get the business to a certain level, you sell, and maybe you move on to something else. But
yeah,
again, for me, it's like you're almost like giving up that effort. Unless the money is like silly money, but
mm,
it's like almost like giving up all of that effort, and then moving on and starting from scratch. And I thought that doesn't make sense too. Based on the
yeah,
age
no,
part you talked about.
yeah, no, that's got to stop, eh? No, straight.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on taking money on investment funding? Because I mean, the one school of thought is that you get the money because then you'd be able to get things done a lot more faster. And what you're actually buying is you're buying time. That's the narrative. Are you in that mindset as well?
I've done it. I've taken money. But the debt financing is, so as opposed to equity financing, I think. So I've borrowed like insane amounts of money that's
Mhm.
like it's frightening, in fact. And my dad once, he was like, listen, this is frightening. So and I've gone down those roads, and I've it's I think that I think if you're careful, and it's really well thought out, and I think you execute perfectly, and all the rest of it, um I don't see a problem with it. I think it's okay, but like sort of like you've got to get to that point. I think you've got to go through a couple of failures, and go through a couple of, you can't learn that from a book. You just
Mm,
can't.
mm,
I have a high risk, a very big appetite for risk, right? I will take on risk. My brother and I, we go sit at the blackjack table many years ago, and I'll end up with we'll go with like $500 each, and I'll end up with a pile of chips like this, and he'll be sort of like plodding along and all the rest of it. But the difference between me and him is I'll leave with nothing, and he'll leave with a couple of hundred. He'll leave with like
mm.
$600 instead of just the 500 he came with. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So I get very, but I've learned from that,
Mm,
and yeah, I think borrowing money is okay. Equity finance, I don't like the idea of uh, being held accountable to somebody else, or
mm,
having somebody else sort of like dictate.
mm.
Um, I don't know how I feel about that. I haven't gone down that road yet, but let's see. Hey, I don't know what to say about that one, hey, Oliver.
Mm. I like the what you said about the debt financing. I'm actually okay with that as well. But like the equity financing, I'm not that cool with.
Mm.
And it's only because you can kind of understand how board seats work, and and you look at some of these, and we're talking about bigger guys. I mean, the tech
Mm.
founders and stuff like that. Where you get kicked out of your own company, and I thought that was always like morally wrong for me. It's like, how do you,
Yeah,
how could you ever
100%.
be in a situation of this is your baby, and someone tells you actually, you're not the right person. So
Yeah.
who would be the right person?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the
But,
reason I don't
but
like
then
the
again, they
equity.
go on to build like $1 trillion businesses. You know what I mean? Like,
No, agreed. I mean,
you got to be able to understand that if you're gonna go large, eh?
yeah.
And that's something that I have been looking at in the last year, definitely, or 2 years, even like 100%. Like I want to go large, and I want to crack it. You know what I mean? It's
Mm,
uh, I'm worried that I don't have the skill set or the temperament to deal with, like you say,
mm,
sitting in a boardroom. I've been in a boardroom scenario when I went through that audit with the medical aids, and it's not what I'm used to. Okay,
okay.
like I will tell somebody like
Okay.
it is, right? And in
Yeah.
a boardroom, it's like you got to be very, politely tell people how to.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I struggle with that one, eh?
Yeah, my wife comes to me, and she shows me this message, from a client or something, and she's like, but does this seem right? And I was like, I just look at it, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of like boardroom speak, It's like normally corporate speak, but there's a certain language that you use in corporate,
Yes.
and and the other thing that corporate teaches you is normally people don't tell you what their job title is. You need to pay attention, because if that
Yeah.
job title is above your one, then
Yeah.
you're in trouble depending on what your response is, to that thing.
Okay.
And there's certain companies, like when I worked, with a contract at MTN. MTN is one of those companies, where the titles matter. And yeah, so you have to, make sure that your tone is right, your messaging is right, and all of those things, or else that's a problem. But like if you're not used to that, I mean, that could be a problem, and
Yeah.
definitely career limiting.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, so you learn a lot. So the one thing that I do want to come back to, you said you want to do something important before 50. What is
Mm.
that? Is that just that you want the business to be at a certain level? You don't have to tell us what the level is, but is that
Mm.
what it means?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a state secret. But
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
that's 100% what I want to do. I want to create something that's important, and that I can be really proud of. Like I can be proud of what I've created, No, but I think you like you say, Oliver, you're the kind of people that you kind of want to keep on sort of leveling up, and I wouldn't be comfortable with myself getting, I could, I've got a bit of money saved up, and I mean, I could, I don't know, I could buy a place in Cape Town and fly up and down, and go there on the weekend, and I can chill now. You know what I mean? I can do that kind of thing. I've thought about it. So if I get to 50 and I haven't achieved something that I think is substantial, like from my point of view, then I will not like myself. I will not be able to look in the mirror. So that's how
Wow.
I feel about that. Yeah.
That's interesting, hey. This particular show, the Moulding Live show, I mean, the idea around it for me always was like, there's so many like people doing amazing stuff. So, I put you in that category.
Thank
And
you.
then I met even in corporate, it doesn't mean that you have to be an entrepreneur to do some really cool stuff.
Oh, yeah,
But, there's
sure.
some people that I met even in corporate, that really, like you can see that whole value creation, and you can see them like making a difference with people around them and things like that. And I thought, that would be a nice way to tell those stories. And when you say, like you want to actually, like make a significant difference, the way I look at that is, it's almost like, I didn't have this as a child, so, we grew up quite poor and stuff like that. So I almost think you need to almost like build on generations, you almost like there must be that generational wealth. And I don't mean wealth just from a monetary point of view. It's almost like, how you train your kids, so that you don't chase them around with a plate, to grow them, and say,
Yeah,
actually, you can be whatever you want. How can I help you to get there? That's what I
yeah.
want. And I think, for our kids, that's something I would like to leave them with as well. Is like give them something that almost like sets them on a platform to build on.
Yeah.
Do you have thoughts around
Can
that?
go the other way. Yeah, that can go the other way. I mean, in my own family, so I've seen. Maybe I shouldn't talk about my own family, but I mean, you don't want to sort of being put out the door at 19 with a mattress and sort of being told to go on my way. It's make or break. You know what I mean? Like going to rehab at 23 and quitting drinking, for as long as I did. I went. How many people do you know that stopped drinking at 23? You know what I mean? Like that's
Hmm.
like, it's not
That's when you only start.
listen, it's not. Yeah, you only start getting busy, sure, but look, I mean, I was in a position where I had to, because I was in such a dark place, and I couldn't stop, and I needed to, otherwise I was going to die. But I
Mm.
mean, that's the thing. So I don't know. It's difficult because I look at my own son, and he's 7. He's turning 7, and I think, am I going to put him out the door and just tell him to go and figure it out? But then there's this part of me is like, if you if I want to support him, and I want to help him get as far as possible, and I want to help him do all those things. But when you over mollycoddle somebody, it goes in the other direction. I think I've seen that so many times,
Mm.
um, where they just sort of like, they don't develop skills because they don't have to. You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
it's a very difficult question, that say, I think.
Mm. I
So
realize that actually
yeah,
as you talk and as I'm thinking about it, and I mean it's not like it's the first time I'm thinking about it, but there is
mm,
that fine balance. The first time I heard it, stark. For me it was quite stark when Bill Gates said, you won't leave anything to his children. He said, you'll give them a certain amount and then they're on their own kind of thing.
I think
I
it's a
thought
bit
that's weird,
unreasonable,
eh?
eh?
I thought that's
Yeah,
weird. I mean, like, why would you not give it to your kids?
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, he's like, yeah, like he's, I don't think, they won't appreciate it was, the kind of the narrative around it. And I get that. Yes. But I think there's a certain amount where you need that safety net. You need that, if something does go wrong, is there someone that I can kind of reach out to? Because if you don't
Because
have
you
that from your family, where do you have that from then? You have to build that up like
never
you did.
know, but you never know how you're robbing somebody of an opportunity to become their best version of themselves, right? By
Mm.
giving them a safety net. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Um, I read this speech at my sister's wedding, and I borrowed some of it from what's his name? He wrote Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah, Napoleon Hill.
Napoleon Hill. What like, and he said this. It was kind of like along the lines like, I wish you hardship. I wish you, having a hard time for the next couple of years, and a good dose of poverty, because that's what builds character. Not, you know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
just having it easy. So I remember my cousin. I go to his house, and his dad built him this house, and the cornicing was all perfect, and the tiling was nice, and he had this big double door glass fridge, and I was like, I don't, where's my fucking, sorry for swearing. Where's my fridge? Like, why don't I get one? You know what I mean? And it's like, when I got my glass door fridge, which I have, it's like now, and it's my glass door, it's my fridge, man. It's I'm proud of it. I worked hard for that, you know what I'm saying? So, what, again, like I said, you might just be robbing somebody of the opportunity to become the best version of themselves if you just give them everything that they want. So, but having said that, I think Bill Gates is being unreasonable. Like, you should give them some, I mean, come on, man. That's like, leave them $1 billion or some, like.
I didn't think he said he wasn't going to leave them anything. I think he said he was going to leave them like 10 million US.
I wasn't going to give them all of it. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's enough to, that would be enough to be in the top 1% of the, the Americans in, like the richest Americans or whatever. So I don't think he was going to leave them poor, but definitely not as rich as he is. Very, very cool, content. I mean, I love this. I love the chat with you. And we got some really cool things out of it. Is there anything that, around this whole, like what we started talking about, that you thought we should have covered that we didn't? I mean, around the topic of your story or around the topic of what you're doing right now. I think the podcast, I mean, one of the reasons I said we should get together is I'm going to be following it. And I'm hoping that, we could, by virtue of you being on it, maybe get a few more healthcare practitioners on your show, because I think that will be amazing around the mental health space. And I'd really like to see where you go with it as well, because it's amazing.
Thanks, amazing. I think with this kind of thing, it will help for us to sort of like link back to each other and network. And I know when you do the linking thing, and it helps. I mean, we want to grow the platform, so I'm grateful for you having me on your show. Thanks. And I hope I can reciprocate, and you can come on my show. We can do a talk and link and meet new people and sort of grow. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that. Thanks, Ryan, for your time. Thanks for everything that you do. And I mean, thanks for the drug rehab center as well. I think it definitely makes a huge difference in our lives already. And I'm looking forward to see, the plan over the next 10 years.
Yeah, let's hope it works out. Thanks. Cool.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned, and we'll speak to you in the next episode.